May God richly bless your day, and may a profound divine blessing rest upon the entire week ahead of you. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We've got a really fascinating one today, I think.
We really do. We are taking a deep dive into the ancient text of Genesis today, specifically chapter 36.
Right, which focuses on the genealogy of Esau. And I know genealogy might not sound like an action thriller at first glance.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds like a dusty family tree. But the detailed scholarly notes from our primary sources today, which are the Holman Study Bible and the NAA Study Bible, they show us that we aren't just looking at a boring list of names.
Not at all. We are analyzing legal territorial claims, massive economic migrations, and really the entire origin story of the Edomite nation.
Which is huge, because for you, as the listener, understanding this sets up so much of what happens later in history.
It does. You know, in the ancient Near Eastern world, genealogies, they functioned as complex political maps. When an ancient scribe documented a list of names like the one we find in Genesis 36, they were actually recording the active geopolitical landscape of their time.
So they were laying out shifting borders, documenting tribal alliances.
Exactly, tracing the foundational structure of sovereign states. We are examining a living document here, one that explains how a single, wealthy nomadic family transformed into a recognized regional superpower.
Okay, so let's jump right into the first major historical event our sources highlight. It's this pragmatic parting of ways between Esau and his brother Jacob.
Right. The scene set by the text is one of massive logistical movement.
Massive is the word for it.
Right.
Esau basically makes the executive decision to pack up his wives, his children, his entire household staff, and his incredibly vast herds of livestock. I mean, he takes all this immense wealth he has painstakingly acquired in the land of Canaan, and he just physically relocates his entire operation.
He moves to the hill country of Seir, putting a very substantial geographic distance between himself and his brother. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying reason for this massive migration actually challenges a lot of our common assumptions.
How so? Because, given the famous historical tensions and that really intense sibling rivalry between Jacob and Esau earlier in the Genesis narrative, you would probably expect this separation to be the dramatic fallout of a bitter, explosive feud.
Right, you'd expect a huge fight. But the text, as illuminated by our study notes, presents a remarkably clear and different reality. This move was driven by pure, practical economics and ancient land management.
It wasn't drama, it was business.
Exactly. The grazing capacity of Canaan had simply reached its limit.
It is basically the ancient equivalent of an antitrust breakup. Canaan was the market, and it simply could not sustain a monopoly of their combined agricultural assets.
That is a perfect analogy. Livestock in the ancient world wasn't just property. It was currency, it was infrastructure, and it was political power.
So the sheer volume of their combined flocks, herds, camels, donkeys, plus the hundreds of herdsmen required to manage them all, it just created a footprint too massive for the local ecosystem.
They aren't separating out of malice here. The infrastructure just cannot handle the combined weight of their operations. One of them had to divest and relocate to a brand new territory to ensure both factions could continue to thrive and grow.
Which makes total sense when you look at it logically. So Esau evaluated the carrying capacity of the land and made the calculated decision to move his enterprise southeast.
To the mountainous region of Seir. And this geography is crucial. Seir wasn't just some empty wasteland. It was a rugged, highly defensible terrain characterized by deep ravines and red sandstone mountains.
So by moving there, he wasn't just finding more grass for his sheep.
No, he was positioning his family along major ancient trade routes, specifically the King's Highway, which connected the Arabian Peninsula to the Levant. This territorial acquisition eventually becomes synonymous with his descendants, the Edomites, setting the stage for their future economic dominance.
But wait, I'm looking at the notes here regarding his immediate family, and I'm seeing a bit of a glitch. The names of the wives listed in chapter 36 don't match the names listed for him earlier in Genesis chapters 26 and 28 at all.
Ah, yes. The naming discrepancy.
It seems like a glaring contradiction, right? For a text that's supposed to function as an official legal state document, we have Ada the Hittite, Oholibama the Hivite, and Basemath, who is identified as Ishmael's daughter. How do the NAA notes reconcile that discrepancy?
Well, the NAA study notes propose a few highly logical historical resolutions to this, reminding us that we are dealing with ancient record-keeping practices. The first proposed solution is that Esau, who was operating as a wealthy and increasingly powerful chieftain, simply had more than 3 wives.
Because in the ancient Near East, marriages were frequently utilized as political treaties and alliances.
Precisely. So different genealogical records or tribal traditions might have chosen to highlight different branches of his family depending on which political alliances were most relevant at the time the record was compiled.
So, what does this all mean? Did the scribes just pick and choose the mothers of the specific tribal leaders they were dealing with in their own era?
That is highly probable. But the second solution the sources offer provides an even more fascinating cultural insight. These women were likely known by multiple names.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The sources point out that the name basemath, for instance, translates literally to perfume or fragrance. It is entirely plausible that this was not her given birth name, but rather a descriptive title, a nickname, or a term of endearment that became her primary identifier in their society.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it really shifts how we interact with the text. We can't just read this as a flat, modern spreadsheet.
No, you definitely cannot.
If basemath is a title like the fragrant one, it shows how layered ancient historical records actually are. We are looking at human culture, where someone's physical trait or a term of affection becomes their official historical designation.
Much like a European monarch being remembered as the Great or the Fair.
Right. It requires us to read between the lines as we look at the massive family network beginning to form in Seir.
And reading between the lines becomes essential when we realize Esau and his family were migrating into a region that already had a robust local population. The hill country of Seir was inhabited by an indigenous group known as the Horites.
Right, the descendants of a man named Seir the Horite. So Esau is the newcomer here. He is entering an established political ecosystem.
Yes. And the text lists the original Horite chiefs, the 7 sons of Seir, and places this indigenous registry right alongside the emerging registry of the new Edomite chiefs descending from Esau.
And the Holman study notes observe that the ancient narrator is subtly documenting a major geopolitical event through this specific structure.
What's fascinating here is the precise mechanism of that geopolitical shift. The text is documenting the gradual integration and eventual absolute dominance of Esau's descendants over the original Horite population.
And it wasn't necessarily achieved through immediate military conquest?
No, if you look closely at the genealogies, you see the strategy of intermarriage. Oholibamah, one of Esau's wives, is actually the descendant of Zivian the Horite.
Ah, I see.
By marrying into the local Horite aristocracy, Esau is merging his massive wealth and economic power with the established indigenous leadership. It is a strategic acquisition of territory and influence, allowing the Edomites to absorb the Horite leadership structure from the inside out over a few generations.
But before we get to the broader tribal structures, there is this one tiny detail buried in the Horite family tree that completely caught my attention.
I think I know which one you mean.
It's so good. Right in the middle of these heavy geopolitical names detailing the indigenous leadership, guys like Lotan, Shobal, Zibian, the text casually drops the most specific slice-of-life anecdote imaginable about a man named Anna.
It stops the entire genealogical progression.
It really does. Just to explicitly mention that Anna is the man who discovered the hot springs in the wilderness while he was out pasturing the donkeys for his father.
Which raises an important question for you as the reader. Why include that specific detail? In a solemn document dedicated to recording the foundations of nations, territorial claims, and the lineages of powerful chiefs, pausing to mention a young man finding a hot spring while chasing after his father's wandering livestock seems entirely out of place to the modern reader.
Yeah, it feels random.
Yet its inclusion matters deeply because it shatters the illusion that ancient history is merely a sterile timeline of inevitabilities and political maneuvering.
It provides this incredibly vivid flash of real, daily, sweaty, exhausted life in the ancient Middle East. You can picture the arid, unforgiving desert landscape of Seir. Anna is likely covered in dust, frustrated that the donkeys have wandered off into the wilderness again.
And then he stumbles upon this miraculous, naturally occurring geothermal oasis.
It must have been a monumental event for a nomadic pastoralist to find a permanent, unique water source like that. He became a local legend for it, to the point where, centuries later, state scribes compiling the official records made sure to note him as the guy who found the hot springs.
It reminds the reader that behind every single name on this seemingly dry list was a living, breathing human being experiencing the harsh realities and sudden triumphs of their environment. But as the text progresses from these individual human moments, we see that humanity organizing itself into something vastly more complex.
Yes, the narrative undergoes a major structural evolution here, moving from a simple family tree into the origins of a formal, recognized government.
The linguistic shift here is undeniable. Early in the chapter, the descendants of Esau are simply referred to as sons, the sons of Eliphaz, the sons of Reuel.
But suddenly, the terminology upgrades significantly. They are no longer just listed as sons. They are explicitly referred to as chiefs, or depending on the specific translation you read, princes.
The Holman study notes dive into the specific Hebrew term utilized in this transition, which is aluf. This is a crucial sociological distinction. The term aleph does not just mean the oldest brother or the patriarch of an extended tent encampment.
Right. It designates a formal, official leader of a vast family unit, a clan, or a specific geographic region.
And the NDAA notes confirm this assessment, identifying these individuals as typical, legally recognized tribal leaders within a larger societal framework.
We are witnessing, in real time through the text, the exact historical moment a family outgrows its patriarchal bounds and transitions into a structured tribal confederacy.
It is no longer just Grandpa Esau managing his kids and his herds.
Exactly. It is the formal confederacy of Edomite chiefs. They are establishing recognized borders, jurisdictions, military alliances, and a system of legal authority over the region of Seir.
This structural evolution from family to confederacy naturally paves the way for the most complex form of ancient government. The centralization of power among these chiefs culminates in the final major section of the text we are analyzing today, the kings of Edom.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text transitions once more and provides a definitive list of kings who reigned in the land of Edom. But the ancient author includes a very specific, highly intentional historical marker alongside this list. The text explicitly states that these kings reigned in Edom before there was ever a king over the Israelites.
That single, seemingly passing phrase carries immense historical and theological weight. From a purely historical perspective, our study Bibles note that this suggests this specific genealogical list was compiled, or at least heavily edited, much later in the historical timeline.
Looking back from a vantage point when Israel did have an established monarchy.
Exactly. Likely during the days of King Saul or King David in the 10th century BC. And they are directly contrasting Israel's timeline with Edom's. They are formally acknowledging that Edom achieved centralized statehood and a functioning monarchy centuries before Israel managed to do so.
Edom beat them to the punch politically, consolidating their tribal confederacy into a kingdom, while Israel was still operating under decentralized tribal judges.
Furthermore, the Holman notes highlight a profound theological context to this political reality. For the ancient audience, reading that Esau's descendants became powerful kings was not merely a political footnote. It was the recognized fulfillment of an ancient divine promise.
Because generations earlier in the Genesis narrative, God had promised Abraham that kings would come from his lineage.
And Esau is Abraham's grandson. This detailed list of Edomite kings is presented as verifiable proof of that enduring divine promise coming to fruition, even outside the primary Israelite lineage of Jacob. The text is validating Esau's line as part of a larger historical and divine tapestry.
The sources also give us an incredibly detailed look at the actual mechanics of this early Edomite crown, and it wasn't at all what we usually picture when we think of an ancient monarchy. We tend to imagine a king passing the crown down to his eldest son in the same capital city, generation after generation.
The NAA notes draw our attention to the specific pattern of succession listed here, which shatters that assumption entirely. When you analyze the list of these Edomite kings, you immediately notice that it is not a standard, unbroken father-to-son royal bloodline.
No, the text lists kings like Bela, the son of Beor, whose royal city was Dinhaba. But when Bela dies, the throne does not pass to the son.
He is succeeded by Jobab, the son of Zerah, who hails from a completely different city, Bozrah.
And later in the list you have Hadad, the son of Bedad, whose royal city was Lavith. The text makes sure to highlight that Hadad is the king who famously defeated the army of Midian in the country of Moab. That is a major defining military victory for the region.
This nonlinear succession indicates a system of shifting regional powers and various different dynasties, rather than one continuous royal family monopolizing power. It suggests that early Edom functioned as an elective monarchy, or a highly meritocratic confederacy.
So whoever had the military might and the political leverage at the time claimed the kingship.
Right. The strongest, most militarily successful tribal chief, like Hadad, after his decisive victory over Midian, was elevated by the other chiefs to the status of king, bringing the capital city and the seat of centralized power to his own hometown.
Moving the capital around the region of Seir, depending on who was in charge.
This is the critical insight. That flexibility is exactly what allowed Edom to establish a centralized state so early. By elevating successful military leaders rather than relying strictly on rigid bloodlines, they could adapt quickly to regional threats, control the lucrative King's Highway trade route, and consolidate their power effectively long before Israel's stricter dynastic system coalesced.
It was a dynamic, highly volatile, but incredibly effective political landscape. It is honestly mind-blowing when you step back and look at the sheer volume of history we've uncovered today. What started as this potentially boring, incredibly dense list of hard-to-pronounce ancient names turned out to be a vibrant, action-packed saga of nation-building.
It really is an incredible narrative.
We saw a massive, pragmatically driven economic migration where the combined agricultural empires of two brothers simply outgrew their market, forcing an ancient antitrust breakup. We witnessed the subtle, strategic intermarriage and eventual dominance over the indigenous Horite tribes.
We explored that amazing, humanizing detour where Anna discovers a geothermal oasis while tracking down lost donkeys in the desert.
And finally, we analyzed the birth of a highly complex, shifting elective monarchy that leveraged military meritocracy to predate the kings of Israel.
This is the true value of performing these deep dives into the source material. It is incredibly easy to skim past genealogies, assuming they are just dry data points. But when you apply critical analysis, and when you utilize the deep historical and linguistic insights of dedicated scholars like those behind the Holman and NAA study notes, you uncover the rich, dynamic, and undeniably human history hiding just beneath the surface of the text.
It challenges us to look deeper and to recognize the profound sociological complexities of the ancient world.
Exactly.
As we wrap up today's exploration, I want to leave you with something provocative to chew on, something that builds on the incredible journey of Esau's family. Think about Esau's initial decision at the very beginning of this narrative.
The decision to move.
Yes. He didn't set out with a grand manifesto to conquer a nation, absorb an indigenous population, or found a dynasty of kings. He made a simple, pragmatic, incredibly mundane logistical decision. His massive flocks of sheep needed more grass. The current infrastructure couldn't support his business, so he had to relocate his operations.
Just a practical choice.
Yet, that one everyday decision set off a multi-generational chain reaction that led to a massive geopolitical shift and the creation of the superpower Kingdom of Edom. It makes you wonder, what seemingly mundane, purely logistical decisions are being made around us right now, in corporate boardrooms, in local city councils, or even in our own homes, that might be quietly, invisibly redrawing the geopolitical maps of tomorrow?
That's a great thought to leave on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into history. God bless all listeners.